So I got a huge topic to discuss, so there's probably too much in this presentation, but it's actually just a small subset of everything that Sutter has learned over the last 10 to 15 years. So I'm going to go over, so Sutter is just a healthcare system. We're only in California. It's a beautiful diagram from our marketing department. So we're, about 50,000 employees, 5,000 doctors. We see a lot of people, very diverse community, but that's not really going to be my focus. But we spend near the bottom there, maybe, so you get a sense of the scale. It varies a lot year to year, but on average we spend about, my department I work for spends about $500 million every year on construction projects and renovation projects for our system. So if we were a company, we would be quite a big company, but we're just a department of about 160 people inside Sutter Health. So here's the prologue gives context for the problem that we've been trying to address for the last 10 years. So I say this, the truth is out there. If you're any academicians, if you've studied the subject, you might be familiar with some of these, but if you're not, you might want to go read these. So in 1987, Morris and Howell looked at major projects, and they found that there hardly any projects were underrunning their budgets, and typically cost overruns are between 40 and 200%. Typically. 2002, this is a famous paper now, it's been often reported, Ben Fleeberg's paper, saying that about 90% of projects overrun their budgets at an average rate of 28%. So, on average, typically, these are not exceptions. From the General Accounting Office in the United States, looking at their healthcare system, the Veterans Affairs System construction projects in 2009. I could read this to you, but it's basically saying that 5 projects have experienced a cost increase of over 100%. And 11 projects have experienced delays, 4 of which are more than 2 years. So this is looking across a whole bunch of major healthcare projects. But look at the years, 1987, 2002, 2009, 2012, which I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the 2012 study. But basically the pattern is that performance is terrible, yet nothing changes. Every time it's been studied academically, the data shows for certain that performance is terrible. It's not just suboptimal, could do better, it's terrible. So at Sutter, we were about to build about $5 billion worth of new hospitals because of the new seismic code requirements. And fortunately, people who preceded me at the company became aware of the reality of the problem, and were very worried that we would actually bankrupt the company if we didn't try to change. So that CII is the Construction Industry Institute based in the United States. So they have a database of projects. So they looked at almost 1,000 projects back in 2012. And it's a detailed report that you can find. I think you can find it online. But basically the conclusion that I'm focused on is only 30% of projects meet or exceed their cost and schedule goals. So we have a 70% failure rate, which again is not really a failure rate, that's like a failed industry. And this is a very credible study. This is not looking at mega projects or major projects or even a particularly complicated set of projects. This is just looking at 1,000 projects with an average value of $65 million, and saying again, now remember the standard they're using is when the project was funded, when did they expect the project to finish, and how much did they expect it to cost. That's what they mean by fail to meet their budget and schedule goals. So well, the interesting thing about our industry is that sometimes when people tell you that they don't know what you're talking about, all of my projects have been on budget, I've never been late. But if you go look at the project it's just a series of painful change orders during the life of the project. And what they meant is they didn't blow the final change order number. They didn't blow the final adjustment to schedule. But if you go back and say, when was that project supposed to finish when the project was funded, when the contract was awarded, and what date was it supposed to open, the day the contract was signed or the project was budget. They could be hundreds of millions of dollars over or years late. So that's why we have like a cognitive disconnect in the business. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about the cognitive disconnect in the business. So a lot of the people in the business, even today, even in the United States, are wondering what problem we're trying to fix because they're not sure that there's a problem. So this is one of my favorite construction project management books. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. It's actually one of the, if you want to know about why decision making is so weird, you should read this book. Now, about a third of the book is about economic theory, which is not as directly relevant if you're in the world of project management. But a lot of it is about decision-making theory. And I have a copy of it right here. You can't take it, but you can flick through it. It's a really good book. So one of the pieces in the book, it talks about humans are really bad at this called base rates. So a base rate in the context I just talked about is that only 30% of projects are successful. That's a base rate. It's a fact, it's analysis, it's not an opinion, it's a fact. And we always ignore base rates. We're not very good in instinctive decision making, in paying attention to base rates. Another example of what a base rate is that like, so this is in the United States, based on data from the small business department in the United States government. Only 35% of small businesses are successful, which means they're not around anymore after 5 years. And yet, if you talk to small business owners and you ask them, in general, what do you think the rate of success, you can tell them this, and they will still come back in a survey and say that in general, they think that 60% of small businesses are successful. Now, if you narrow the question down and you ask them about their business, they will typically tell you that they have a 70% chance of being successful. You told them that in general, small businesses fail at a rate of 65%, but they think the failure rate for them will be 30%. So we tend as humans to always think that, yeah, I know that, but I'm going to be different. Yeah, I know that, but we are going to be different. So what I speculate is this us? Where you would say only 30% of projects are successful. Maybe if you survey project teams around in the industry, you say, well, what do you think? They might tell you something like, this is based on anecdotal conversations I've had over years going to conferences, that 60% of projects are successful. Maybe there's a 40% failure rate. Because no one wants to believe they're in an industry with a 70% failure rate. And if you're talking about major projects or complex projects, you're probably in an industry that's in the 90 to 95% failure rate. And then if you ask them, well, what, on your team, the project you're on right now, what do you think your chances of success are? I'm sure most people think that their project is going to be successful if they're in the early phase. So we have this sort of like, it's a base rate cognitive disconnect we have in the industry. So my main point is, even though this environment, we're all trying to solve huge problems and come up with new processes, there's an whole industry out there that doesn't think there's a problem to fix. And the other thing is we almost have a system that we set up, right? Why we're in this situation where nothing changes is basically a reaction to the actual incentives that exist in the industry. I call this the stagnation equation. Feel free to use it. So performance is terrible, okay, a fact. But everybody is making money. Every now and again there's a major bankruptcy, and actually small companies go out of business quite regularly in the construction business in the United States. But in general, most companies, there are many companies that are in construction and in design that have been in business for literally over a century, certainly decades. So if performance is terrible, but everyone is making money, what's going on? Well, the other thing is that capital construction projects are often funded by companies that are not in capital construction. They're in the business of something else. Capital projects are merely a means to an end. Like at Sutter Health, we're in the business of healthcare. So hospitals are an incidental requirement in order to provide healthcare. So the owners of Sutter Health don't know much about capital project delivery. They don't know much about the world. So then in a sense, you could say the owners, like the C-suite, are not really paying attention. So they're not sensitive to the kind of perverse environment in which they're making a request for a building. So if you add up these, performance is terrible, everybody's making money, the owners and the funders aren't really paying attention, this is why you get to nothing changes, right? Why would nothing change if this is true? It's normal. Why would it change? Everyone's making money? So why would you change? So our current reality is, so you have optimism bias, plus you have this weird world of perverse incentives. So that is why you get to a situation where any normal project will normally fail. And then for complex projects, you almost certainly fail. So it's sort of like so one of the things I say, what's the owner's role in transforming project performance? Well, one of the things is to deal with the world as it actually is, which if you're an owner about to fund a major complicated project, understand that it will almost certainly fail. You won't meet your objectives if you don't make big changes. If you just go and tender the normal way you do it, then it will fail. So what has Sutter Health's performance record been on major complex projects in the last, it would be now 11 years? So even though this isn't a photograph of everyone, this is a series of photographs of many of the major projects that we've done in the last 11 years. So we've completed 22 major complicated projects in the past 11 years at a cost of $3.1 billion. And they've all been on time, on budget, with no compromises to the original scope and program requests. Well, there is one exception. So which is it the red button? The red button. So this one here, with its the skin system. This is an architect's. They drew it, and later they figured out how to build it. This is in a highly regulated seismic zone, not that far away from a major earthquake fault, and trying to make this building shake in an earthquake and not have these two different skin systems separate and breach the waterproofing requirements of the building, quite challenging. Skin contractor went bankrupt during this project. So for us, it was about 4 months. It's a 5-year build, was 4 months late, was about 2% over budget for us. We consider that a failure. But in the world of major project delivery, that's actually a home run. It's a big, you're almost on time, almost on budget. But none of the non-Sutter participants in the project made any money. We eroded all of their contingency and all of their profits. So it was not a successful project for us, because we thought if that becomes the pattern, no one's going to want to come and do any more of our projects. But what does that translate to? So, Sutter, and this is what we have in progress right now. So it's a major project still underway. Those are the finished ones. These are the ones we're still doing. So this is about $2.3 billion in construction that's underway. Almost finished, actually. All of these three major projects. The top one in the top left-hand corner is, from a construction point of view, signed off. It won't open for business until March. That's the Van Nessengeri Hospital in San Francisco, which on its own is a $2 billion. $2 billion of that $2.3 billion is the photograph in the top left-hand corner. And so overall, 4% under budget and all on schedule. So our track record's quite good. So right now it's at 95% in an industry with a base rate of 30%, and in major projects in an industry with a base rate of maybe 10%, Sutter is at 95%. And once those projects which are in construction are finished, it's going to go up to maybe 97%. So what on earth is going on at Sutter Health? So let me go through. So basically, it's only one thing. We just did one thing, which was we completely overhauled the entire project delivery system. But fortunately, that one thing breaks down into, you can break it down many ways, but for this purposes of today, you can break it into 4 main areas of focus, right? Which I was talking about, facing reality, then setting up an environment that incentivizes team success, then make sure that as an owner you're paying attention to what you, the owner, cares about and communicating that to the team, and then building an entirely different work culture on our projects. So I'm going to go through some of these areas, and I'll go. If you start to run late, let me know. Once I get to about 10 minutes, we'll do this, and then I can speed it up if I get there. So basically, face reality, which was what I said initially, which is base rates between 10 and 30%, you're probably going to fail. So be incentivized to change the way that you set up your projects. So the other thing we've done about facing reality is we no longer kind of like guess at what a project would cost or how long it's going to take. We actually do intentional validation of a project, which is we actually spend money, at-risk money, to get teams together to look at our major projects and say, what is a reasonable budget, what's a reasonable schedule for a project of this type, and if they come back with a number that's too long or too high, we work with them to drive it down, make it faster, make it cheaper. And that's all called our validation process. So we don't go to our board of directors to ask for money until we've done this on our major projects. It just sounds completely rational, but prior to 2007, we didn't do this. You basically, sometimes we would get like projects arrive on our desk and say, our first reaction was like, who put this budget together? That's crazy. We would know immediately from day one, there is no way that project can be built for that number. And literally you'd hear stories about, well, I was talking to so-and-so, we were walking across the parking lot, and he said it was about $300 a foot, and we multiplied it up and there's your budget, not knowing that he was talking about a completely different kind of project that was built 2 years ago. Your project isn't going to the midpoint of construction for 7 years. There's this thing called escalation, and the whole business environment has changed in the last 3, so you basically, the big barrier in the United States to doing this is that under accounting laws, if you do this and you kill the project, you have to expense that money that year against your books that year. I don't know what the rules are here. But the primary reason we were not spending money to validate projects was because nobody at the operating company level wanted to have that hit their budgets. So they would just kind of say, why would you spend? They didn't want to spend money. If the project is approved, you can consider the money part of the capital, and then you can depreciate it over the life of the project. So basically what we're trying to do is build the four-legged stool. What's the program? Why does it need to exist? How much level of quality do we want? When does it need to open, and how much money are we willing to spend to get that return, that value? And we get teams to validate that. So the major thing that we did, I think, which Sutter is more famous for, but there were many other things we did, was we purposely incentivize team success. We changed the contract. We wrote a different contract called an integrated form of agreement. Basically, it sort of puts a big pot of money in the middle for the whole team. And the most important thing we did, which was revolutionary, was put designers and builders in the same pool, which meant if your design can't be built, you will lose money. If you don't tell the designer that thing can't be built, the thing that they're drawing can't be built as a builder, you will lose money. So you try to incentivize people to pay much closer attention to what's going on in the early parts of the project. So basically, on our major projects, we put between 7 and 15 companies collectively at risk. They're not individually at risk for their profit. They are collectively at risk for the sum of all profits. The way you make more money is you make the whole bag of money get bigger. The way you lose money is if problems erode the size of that bag. If at the beginning of the project you're going to get 23%, say 23% of the bag of money, that's how much you'll get at the end. So the only way to get more money is to make the bag of money bigger, and you do that by innovation and productivity savings on the project. And we guarantee the cost of work. You put 100% of your profit at risk. In return for that, we guarantee the cost of work, and then you get a share of the savings. So that's basically how we incentivize incentivize success on projects. The other thing we did, which I didn't mention here, is we have a very, very rigorous change management process at Sutter, which is our way of disciplining our side of the table, which is that if we change our request during the project, it basically has to be signed off by senior management. It's not controlled by the ownership at the project level. It goes up to the senior management system, and that makes a lot of change requests go away. Once they find out that Sarah, who's our president, is going to have to sign off on your request for an extra OR, they sort of, maybe I don't need it. But it means that, but it also helps if they are willing for it to go in front of Sarah. It means that we really should study it for them, because it's probably a very good business proposition. The other thing is make sure as an owner you're paying attention to what you care about and you're communicating that to your team. So I'm going to digress momentarily into a more academic sphere. This diagram is something I came up with some very smart co-authors of mine, including Glenn Ballard, a few years ago. This is the idea that all projects only have 4 phases: value definition, representation, realization, and value capture. This is why, whether it's a bridge or a highway or a hospital or a cruise liner or a spaceship, the project's all the same. They all go through the same 4 phases. And the way to make a project successful is to know this and be very focused on your value definition. Why does the project exist? That's phase number one. The most important phase is establishing why the project exists, which is value definition. And then you draw it in a way that allows you to know that you will get that value. And then you draw it in a way that you know allows it to be built later, which is the realization phase. And then at the end of the project, once it's realized, you start to capture the value out of the project. And the only real definition of success is, does value capture align with does the value capture at the end of the project align with the value defined at the beginning? And it's basically, the idea is, the thing that's the most neglected phase is the value definition phase. A lot of project teams come to a project just knowing that, hey, I've got to build an office. This clinic, I have 15 months to build a clinic, and it better not cost more than $70 million, and they are never invited into the conversation about why the clinic needs to exist, what's important, what are we trying to achieve, what are our expectations for the patient environment, what are our expectations for quality of finishes. And they just show up. Often builders show up near the back end of representation, and there's I'm sure you've been exposed to the idea the earlier you get people and the more leverage it is to make value-added changes. So there's a paper on this, which includes a nice little fairy tale. It's a good little short story in the IGL. I was at the Oslo IGLC where I presented the paper. So basically in Sutter we have this thing. You don't need to be able to read this, don't worry about it. But basically we have a document at the beginning of these projects called the Project Charter, which explains why we're building the project and what from that the team builds their conditions of satisfaction. So it's a collective environment. So why does the project exist? So the owner is communicating why the project exists. The team is reacting to that statement and saying, okay, if that's what you need, then our conditions of satisfaction as a team are these. And we're going, yes, I like those conditions of satisfaction. I see they align with what we're trying to achieve. Good. Let's put it in the contract and put you at risk for that. And that's where the nervousness comes in. Oh, we might lose money if we don't achieve the conditions. Yes, because the whole purpose of the project is for us to get the value that we want, and your conditions of satisfaction align with the value that we want. So what we're asking for you is to give us a facility that can extract this value. So why wouldn't we put you at risk for that, right? Not at risk for whether we achieve the value later, because a lot of that's in our control of how we operate the facility. But if we agree that the facility needs to look like this, then you should be at risk for giving us a facility that looks like that. So having done that, and you have a condition of satisfaction list, then you want to create, this is about visual management, you want to create a dashboard for every item that you care about, which is these conditions of satisfaction. So what's the purpose of a dashboard? The purpose of a dashboard is not to create a dashboard and be able to tell the people that you have dashboards, which is what a lot of dashboards are actually about. But the purpose of a dashboard is to drive a conversation about something important. Every dashboard needs a goal, a variance, and often, but not necessarily, a trend in order to drive that kind of conversation. So I'll give you an example. I don't know if this is very legible, but basically this is an are we on budget dashboard for a major hospital project in San Francisco. What it is, if I can tell you, where is the goal, do you think, even though I know you can't read it? No one has laser pointers anymore. There was a time a few years ago where everybody had a laser pointer on their keyring. So this is the goal, right? This is basically saying, this is the amount of contingency that the team has in order to make their budgetary condition of satisfaction. And they want to keep this as high as possible because they get half of this money at the end of the project. So they'd like to keep it high. So they say, this is the maximum. If we get to this, that represents the most extra money we can make. So every week, we're going to see where that is. And so you have a goal here, right? So the team has a goal. There's the goal. Where is the latest variance? Well, the latest variance is there. So you're saying, oh, well, we got a ways to go. If we save some more money, we will make more money. So that's the variance. And then, where is the trend? On this one, we have a trend. So the trend is generally upward. So the team is generally doing good. Now, later on this project, it went down. There was a major problem with the framing on the project, and they started to erode that very quickly. because we're reviewing this every week, the whole team goes, we have a problem. There isn't like a framing contractor being beaten up in a dark room by the general contractor, and only those two people know the problem. They're not talking to the owner, because why bother the owner? They'll just get stressed out if we tell the owner. And it's just between you and me. There's no one else that can help with this problem. It's just going to be the general contractor and the framer. No, every week we're talking about this, and suddenly it was plummeting, and everybody wanted to know why, and the whole thing came up. And so the whole team knows the problem, the owner knows the problem, and the whole team starts to work on solving the problem, which is why you want the whole team to try and solve these problems. Is the goal important? Well, yes, the goal is important. So it's driving a conversation about something that's important. It's easy to understand, it measures something important, therefore it drives a conversation worth having. So that's the test of a dashboard. So this is a bit of, I'll go through this quickly because it's a little bit more in the weeds. But one thing we uncovered as we're on this journey is that companies in general are not very good at projecting the cost to complete their work. Some are, but they're rare. A lot aren't. And the reason is because of the contract environment. Companies in general in the United States haven't needed to be good at this. It's not a catastrophic risk to them, because the major strategy for managing risk is going after change orders. For good reasons, not a cynical exploitation of change orders, but this is what the contract says. And so if you can keep getting more money and more time, you don't need to be as good at knowing your cost to complete. So basically, the best practice now is agree the scope. I'm going to get to what we found out is a lot of companies go like, hey, when we say, what's your cost to complete? They would go like, well, my budget was X. I billed you Y, so I guess if I subtract Y from X, that's how much the remainder of my scope is going to cost. And then literally that's true. Like there are companies that do it that way. They're not actually pricing the work to come. They're just subtracting their bills to date from their price. And near the end, they realize it's not going to make sense, and suddenly then the change orders arrive. So what we tried to do is take the cost of the work, and this is very challenging because teams are not used to doing this, but say, take your price and spread it across the sequence of construction. Get in a room, agree the sequence of construction, and take your takeoff cost and spread it in time across the sequence, so that when we finish work, you don't then need to price the remainder work. You've already priced it, so we'll just add those two numbers together. And if the work to date is costing more, you'll know that you're actually going over, and we can start to react to it this week. So what we found by doing this, within 3 weeks of a 2.5-year build, we knew we had problems, because immediately we were not meeting the estimates for the early phase of construction. Normally in major projects, you might have to do 50% of the construction before somebody knows they have a problem they can't fix. So I'm going to skip on. So this is like, are we delivering what was asked for dashboard? In this one, down the bottom on these are all the different clinical care zones in the building. There's no time on this one. This is just a list of departments. Medical departments in the hospital, and then this is a percentage variance. Like we asked for maybe 25,000 square feet of clinical care space, and this is telling you as a percentage, what does the Revit model that we're using tell us how big that space is, and we're just checking that we're across the project still pretty close to what we asked for at the beginning. It's amazing how many times this isn't tracked during the life of a project. And all we said was, as long as it could be up to 5% less than what we asked for, but it can't be more than 5% less than what we asked for. As long as it's more than that, we're good. And this is basically showing that we're doing fine. But I think there was one of the things that triggered the major audit in I think it was the VA, was they were finding that buildings were showing up way bigger than they were authorized by Congress. And they said, how could this possibly happen? Well, it's because people don't do this very often. It's just that every month something happens and it accumulates over time, and before you know it, you have a bigger building. And bigger buildings usually cost more. So you have a variance, you have a goal, and you have and you say the variance must exceed this goal. So it drives a conversation about something important. This, in a sense, is our "Are we on time?" dashboard. We have a very rigorous implementation of the last planner system on our major projects. We do it in software. We're ruthless about finish to start relationships. And we have a very complicated network of tasks. And why? Well, because it requires a very complicated network of tasks to get a hospital built. And this basically, every week we look at the chains of work we isolate all the work that's late, and we have conversations about, we have conversations about what's late. This stream of work is 3 days late, this is 7 days late, this is 5 days late. Oh, this is 21 days late. We better have a meeting about this. And so this is a dashboard, in a sense. It's telling you something important. You want to be on time. It's telling you you're not going to be. And one of the things I tell the people, the reason why our projects are on time is because every week we know exactly how late we are. We're not on time because we had a perfect plan and we figured out how to build hospitals. We just have systems in place that let us know every week how many days late we are. So, which is different from a classic project environment where when you've got 2 weeks to go, you realize you're 6 weeks late. Because suddenly there's not enough hours in the day and I don't have enough people available to make this work. And so this is on our most sophisticated projects we use TACT. And I love TACT. And one of the reasons I love TACT is because of this. As an owner, this is, in a sense, a 55-page Primavera schedule on one sheet of paper. And I can understand it. Basically, this is all the floors in a 7-story construction. Every different color is a different trade, and this is telling you how every trade is flowing through the building during what is like I think a 9-month construction period. This is the entire build of the entire project on one sheet of paper because they took the time and trouble to figure out how to flow through the building. But it's a dashboard. On a project, I could show up, I can drop a string down here, if that's the date, and I can know who's supposed to be on every floor, and I can walk the job and see if they're there. And so can all the superintendents. It's an amazing, it takes a ton of work to get this built, but once you built it, it's extraordinary for running a job. And this is a project with not a lot of replicable spaces. This is not a hotel. This is not an office. This is a high-end quaternary care clinic in San Francisco. So BIM for us is not a design tool. Yes, it is a design tool. And BIM for us is not a fabrication software. Well, yes, it is. But primarily for us as project management group in Sutter Health is BIM is a risk management tool. And it's a visual dashboard for managing risk. And the only things that can help you manage the risk are scope, budget, and schedule. Which is so it's interesting to me that BIM's not often perceived as a risk management tool. And so it's not implemented in a way that's actually as helpful as it can be. We are very, very, very strict around BIM on our projects. I don't have any fancy pictures of our BIM models, but they're intense and crazy. But the thing about BIM models is they look really, really intense and amazing, but you can't tell by looking at a BIM model whether it's buildable, legal, constructible, affordable. As long as it's got a lot of primary colors and a lot of detail, people think it's amazing. But that's not the real intelligence of the BIM model. So basically, back to this 4-phase project construction, what we basically use BIM for a lot on our projects is connecting representation and realization, basically in other language, design and construction together in a way that helps. So we're connecting these two areas. We're trying to make sure that the scope being built, the schedule, the budget, but it's basically, it's linking those together so that you're designing in a way that talks to the value, you're designing in a way that can be built, and you're getting all of the players to talk about that all the time, every week. So the key thing about Smart BIM is a focus on the workflow you'll use to create the model before you create the model. You get the team together to get them to understand what's going to be finished at what level of detail when. And that is like a completely mind-blowing conversation. Most people come from projects where they just don't, that's not even a subject. And that's what we focus on. You get the team together to self-create their workflows that answer that question. What part of the project is going to be designed at what level of detail, when? And then you sequence it in that way. So, and then you model the build, and then you build the model. We get that mindset in our teams. And we'll work from a technology point of view to make sure the latest version of the model is available to anyone at any time. Now, if you've been on projects, you know there is actually no such thing called the model. We say there's the model, but it's usually hundreds of different files and up to 7, 10 different software packages, and that's the model. So having the latest version of the model available to any project participant at any time is a non-trivial opportunity, let us say. But we work very hard on trying to make that work. And we encourage people to go to where the problem is when they're talking about problems. If someone's saying, hey, did you know that the steel penetrates the glass skin? It's funny how if you just talk in words, people just say things, oh yeah, I know, we got it, we're working on it, it'll be a problem. That steel beam's not going to be protruding through the glass wall next week. And sometimes that's just minuted in words, and people say, Joe said that they would work on this, and we'll check back next week on what's gone, and he'll come back and say, yeah, we got it. But if you go to the model and you show a beam sticking through the glass wall, and they say that, you can then say, how are you going to solve? It doesn't look like it's an easy problem to fix, right? And then suddenly you can uncover very quickly that, oh my God, this is a major problem, simply because you got them to go, no, let's not talk. Let's go open the model. All the time, let's go open the model. It's available to us right now. Let's go look at it. And let's actually write down, let's do a little photo capture and write down what you said you're going to do. And next week we'll come back and we'll see if the beam is still sticking through the glass. And so it's a very different kind of, you're just generating a completely different environment for conversations. This is the one that's one of my early soapbox subjects. Do not be distracted by the how are we going to hand over the BIM into operations conversation. Unless you're working with an owner with a very sophisticated vision and staff in that environment. I found that the only thing that the early teams wanted to talk about was this subject. And I hadn't even mentioned it. I'm not in that world. I want to make sure we get the right building. But all they wanted to talk about was, life cycle analysis and how we want to design your BIM in a way. I said, no. If we just burn all the files at the end of this project and don't do anything with the BIM, there's still tremendous high value in doing what we've just agreed to do. Allow me to manage that conversation about handover and operations myself. It just became a very distracting conversation. They didn't want to talk about the hard work of workflows and what's going to be done when, at what level of detail, how we represent it, how will we solve problems, how will we coordinate. They wanted to really talk about this, and I said, we'll talk about that once we finish the conversation on this. I have a whole other diatribe on that subject, which is like, okay, briefly. What I found in the United States, the facilities and maintenance departments are so underfunded normally. If you give them a spreadsheet, a 2-column spreadsheet, column 1 says equipment number, column 2 says which room it's in. They will be light years ahead what they've ever been given on any project today. You give them a 2-column spreadsheet that tells them where every piece of that maintainable equipment is, they're good. And now you want to have a conversation about how they're going to maintain a 3D environment and how it's going to be help them, then you understand that the world of the most building managers live in a world of budget cuts and short staff. So building a different work culture, so big rooms and celebrations. So basically this is one of our projects near Sacramento. They have a big room. This is where people work all the day. It's an enormous trailer on the construction site. This is the big room inside the big room. This is where they have their major meetings. Major status updates, major problem solving, and this is them playing a thing called Top Golf together as a team. It's like fluorescent neon golf at night. Okay, this is them seeing this guy was about to leave, and this is the general superintendent dressing up as him. It was like Todd lookalike day, and the Jim won. He looked exactly like him, and then. Big room, big ideas. So they do a lot of celebration. On all our projects, they go out to dinner together. We celebrate major milestones. We allow goofiness. We have like, so like it's trying like a genuine like a team environment. Like we're a team, we get on with each other, which means that you can argue with each other and without it feeling unsafe. Very briefly, so on our projects, we change the culture by, as a team, reviewing all the risks and opportunities on the project. We're trying to encourage early sharing of low probability problems so that we have the best opportunity to make them go away. A very sophisticated budgetary risk assessment tool is this. You say the probability of a risk, how much cost do you think the risk will be when it happens? And you multiply those two numbers together, and then you just go through them all like this, and you add up the whole number, and you say, we're going to say that's actually how much it's going to cost the project, and you deduct that from the shared savings plan. So basically, you just list of risks, list of probabilities, lists of dollar values, and that's at its heart, that's our very sophisticated risk management tool for budget. The most thing is that, like, on our projects, getting people in the early phase of the project to talk about things they think are risks or opportunities uncovers that they misunderstood the contract. You're saying, so on our contract, it's like, the only change orders are if we change our mind about what we asked for. The fact that you can't figure out how to build it, that's what that's why you're an expert in the business, is why you're on the contract, you figure that out. That's your issue to follow. We'll pay for changes that we make. We'll change for changes in the law, and we'll change for discover conditions that couldn't have reasonably been anticipated. Everything else is yours, or ours, and it builds a culture of making decisions in the interest of the project as a whole. Getting the team together in a team environment to talk about team risks drives a culture of focusing on project success rather than company success. So we're basically trying to get from this is like how risks are normally handled in a project, like it's your fault, not my fault, and we get them to like look at the risk as a team, all facing towards the list of risks and thinking about what are we going to do about these risks. I'll skip through this. You can read this later. I'm going to make the presentation available. I do this as training for our project staff and our teams. But we plan the work together every week in reaction to the late paths. We daily engagement statusing, how is the plan going today? Did anything happen in the last 24 hours that's a problem? And we swarm to fix the problems in real time. I won't go into too much detail, but this is an important slide. But basically what we're trying to do is build a culture of respect, trust, accountability, and learning. And the most important part of this is the creating safe spaces. What you really want to do is make people comfortable with arguing with each other, comfortable with challenging each other. I definitely don't, I don't want a whole list of etiquette rules around how people need to, just don't be personal, don't be insulting. But if you're angry about something, you can come to a meeting and be angry about it, and then we'll work on it. We'll let people process. If you put too much of an etiquette burden on a big team with all kinds of backgrounds, people won't talk. They'll get so stressed out about being polite and using the right language, they won't necessarily, they'll shut down. So we like passionate, noisy environments, but respectful. You can be, like you can be passionate and respectful. You can be agitated and respectful. There are ways of doing this. So we're trying to create safe environments for people to solve problems. And then we can create analytics. We do weekly learning. We do root cause analysis for why things are going wrong. And we try to analyze trends and see if we can make some big strategic changes in project culture or project systems. So we're learning as we go. All of the projects change over time. Our projects, the systems in place on our latest projects are a little different from what they were a few years ago. So we're always trying to change. So we end up being, so we had the stagnation equation, so now you want to try and get to the realization equation where you realize that performance is terrible, and the people on the project realize that they might not make any money if that stays that way, and they realize that now you're in a project environment where the owner is paying attention. So in that environment, everything changes. So Sutter only made a couple of intentional changes, which we intentionally changed the contract, and we intentionally changed the validation process, and we intentionally changed our own internal change management process. Everything else you see not there came out of the projects. We made 3 major intentional changes. but everything else we do has been self-created on our projects. So that's what I mean by everything changes. So it's very important. There's an asterisk on this slide, which is a very important asterisk, because this it's really about the owner's role. So what I would say is like that asterisk is if the owner faces reality and leads the change, if the owner incentivizes the team's success, if the owner is clear about what they care about, if the owner is committed to a high respect and trust work culture, and if the owner is present, committed, fair, open, and transparent. So definitely if there's an owner out there that thinks they can just borrow Sutter's IFOA contract and suddenly the world changes, they're just setting themselves up for the normal level of success, which is at best 30% opportunity. So that is my presentation. Okay. And I leave in a couple of books. So this is Thinking Fast and Slow. This is a really good guide to integrated project delivery and lean. This is also another great guide to integrated project delivery and lean. So if any you're interested in like reading is your thing, you can take a look at those.
So earlier I just thought perhaps Digby is an American doctor, and actually it seems he is. Because all the doctors always, they try to tell you things that are written somewhere in the books, and they know that the people, they do not believe that the things work properly. And now you repeat, you want to say that actually the scheme and the experience you have, it works.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So, and now there are plenty of questions.
You mentioned briefly about the maintenance and using the 2 columns spreadsheets.
Right.
Well, my question is, do you actually use BIM models in maintenance as a smart owner, or is it really the 2 rows or like the 2 column spreadsheets that you're actually using?
So at Sutter, we're not a sophisticated owner of our assets yet. So you understand at Sutter, so basically it's somewhere in the middle. We don't hand over models to our maintenance department, but we do hand more than a 2-column spreadsheet. So to understand at Sutter, we didn't even have a single place where you could find all the drawings of all our buildings. So our big initiative in 2018, 2019 is to create an electronic file folder so that we can find all those documents. And basically what we do is we try to create equipment lists that can transfer into the maintenance database so that we pre-populate the maintenance database. So we hand over a pre-populated maintenance database. So it has all of the equipment listed and all the locations equipment in. There are various products. There's Maximo, there's Four Rivers. So we populate the databases for them at handover. And we also engage them in the design process and the commissioning process so that the staff is fully trained when we open the building. And they feel like that it's their building. It's not like a building that someone else is dumping on their lap. It's like, oh, finally I get my building. Yeah.
Just to get it off the plate, there is a saying that you get what you measure, yes?
Yes.
So if the success rate is extremely important for the Shutter Help, so could it be that Shutter is somehow trying to play the system, or how does the Shutter Help compare to the industry benchmark in general?
You mean
in terms of the cost, in terms of the quality, in terms of the schedule, and everything else?
That's a really hard question, right? If any of you've been in this business, like our environment is like, so do our buildings cost more? Is one of the reasons we're successful? Are we spending way too much money and we're giving our teams too long? Well, I would say go to the Bay Area in San Francisco right now and go talk to somebody on the Stanford Hospital project. Right, that project is going to be between 12 and 18 months late if they open at the end of next year like they're saying now. And you can't find anybody who'll tell you how many hundreds of millions of dollars they're over budget. So that's what we're comparing against. It's a really hard question because in our environment, if we come under budget, we're told that we overfunded the project. If we come in over budget, we're told that we're incompetent. So there's this little sweet spot. If you come in about 4% under, then you're good. If you come in more than 4% under, you played the game. It's a game. If you come on over, then you're not good at your job. So it's how much should a hospital cost? It's like, then my thing is like the owner needs to figure out how much money are you willing to pay to get the value out of it, right? So Sutter's willing to pay that much money. The problem with our system is not that in our environment, Sutter's environment for acute care, the problem for us is not that we do want to make buildings cheaper, but the systems are so bad, it doesn't matter whether the San Francisco hospital was budgeted at 1.7 billion or 2.4 billion. The problem is the system is there's no system that could attract to 1.7 or 2.4 because there's no way to predict. There's nothing in there. We had to self-create in our system systems for actually knowing that you're on track or not and that you can keep course correcting. So if we had solved the problem simply by adding more money to our projects, we would have still gone over because the systems are you could spend anywhere between in California right now between $900 and $1,500 a square foot on a hospital, depending on what your hospital is. The case we make is that it doesn't matter whether it's 900 or 1,400. That's not the driver of whether you'll fail or success. It's the systems you use to track to the number. If you don't have the right systems, you can't track to a number. Even if it's at 1,400, you would end up at 1,600. So I don't think so. And the system is not rigorously benchmarked. There is no rigorous benchmark that I can go to that could tell you one way or another whether we're cheaper or faster or anything. So all I know is that our projects are based on our private analysis of the market. We feel our hospitals are medium cost, but they're fast. Like we get our projects done in 5 years, where the typical is 7. So we're definitely not padding the schedules. Our ability to hit schedule is really, really remarkable. And it's a very highly regulated. Just so you know, in California hospitals, if you change anything in the design, you potentially have to spend 30 to 60 days arguing with the state about whether you can make a change or not. And sometimes it doesn't matter how small the change is, because hospital construction is regulated at the design level by the state. So there's a lot of risk in our projects for schedule because of that.
Okay, and we make the third question as well. Andke siit kähku nüüd.
I think that your projects have a lot bigger teams than similar projects which are using more traditional methods. Does it require more or bigger team to manage this? I think once the project's in design production or construction production, no. But what we do is we get more people involved in the early design. We probably see bigger teams on our projects in the value definition early representation phase, when we're trying to figure out what the project needs to be and how we're going to set the project up strategically for success. Later, you'll see more people in non-traditional roles, and people often interpret that as having more staff. I don't think we have more people on the projects. We just have you have more visibility to everybody who's working on the project, and then we have less people doing things that don't add any value. I think there's still opportunities for us to actually lighten the overhead, though, because I still think that they're still maintaining what I would call legacy systems in the background, just in case this new way of working doesn't work. So I've seen on the projects, I knew they were still in the background maintaining a P6 schedule that they were paying a consultant to maintain for them, which had no value, but it just couldn't get them to stop. And it drove me crazy. I basically at the point now where I just don't, you are, and we're going to put it in the contract or something, that you will not have a P6 schedule on this project. You just won't have it, because As soon as you have more than one schedule, you have arguments. You only want one schedule. So anyway, so I think that the short answer to your question is no. I think that we have the same or less people. But we have more people in the very early phase.